Hey guys, welcome back to Star Wars Canon. Sorry it's been over a week since the last upload. I had some family coming to town and wasn't able to sit down and knock out this video. These videos actually take a surprising amount of time and work, normally between like 8 to 12 hours of video. So if you liked the last couple and if you're watching this one, please hit that like button and subscribe so I know that I'm not just shouting into the void. That being said, this video is the second in a series in which we're taking an in-depth look at the Book of Boba Fett. If you missed the first episode, be sure to check it out as it'll have some important information for understanding this video. I'll put a card in the top right corner for you. In the first episode, we saw that Boba, despite what he says, is not a crime lord, nor is he even trying to be one. Instead, Boba is setting himself up as a daimyo, which is a person who rules over a territory with honor and respect instead of manipulation, violence, or extortion. Throughout the first episode, Boba's intentions were made abundantly clear, but his motivations are still a mystery. He wants to rule with honor and respect, but why? What happened to the cold-blooded bounty hunter we all remember? Well, that's what we're going to learn in this episode. The episode starts off with Boba interrogating the only surviving assassin from the Order of the Night Wind. The assassin doesn't seem intimidated and tells Boba, "Ichuta." This is a Huttese insult that has never actually been given a definite definition in Star Wars, but it probably means something along the lines of "screw you." It was first uttered in Empire, actually, by E3PO to C3PO in Cloud City, to which C3PO responded, "How rude." Boba has a great line here where he says, "If he's not going to speak, he no longer needs his head," to which a Gamorrean responds by putting his knife to the assassin's throat. But the guy seems totally unfazed by this. Boba and Fennec decide that if the assassin isn't afraid of them, maybe he'll be more afraid of a Rancor. Once they dump him into the Rancor pit, the assassin immediately starts talking and says he was sent by the mayor. This part actually kind of bugged me a little bit. Why would he be so much more afraid of the Rancor than getting his throat cut by a Gamorrean? I mean, neither death seems particularly long nor drawn out. It's not like the Sarlacc where you'll be slowly digested over 1,000 years. This is just a small detail though, so not really a big thing. As Boba and Fennec march the captive assassin through the streets, Boba has his helmet on. This is actually something we talked a lot about in the first video. Boba seems to be very intentional about when and where he's removing his helmet. He takes it off when he's around the people of Mos Espa, the people he's trying to protect and rule over. He wants them to see him as an honorable and respectable leader. However, when he portrays strength and intimidation, the helmet goes right back on. That's exactly what we see as the helmeted Boba Fett marches a captive assassin through the streets of Mos Espa. Everyone turns to look. Helmet off, I'm your trustworthy leader. Helmet on, I don't take crap from anybody. Boba doesn't even take off his helmet in front of the Major Domo, someone who's already seen him without it on. He's clearly ticked and marches right into Mayor Mokk Shaiz's private office. When the mayor asks, "Who is this who enters unannounced?" Boba hits back saying, "You know damn well who." At this point, Mayor Mokk Shaiz acknowledges that the assassin is a member of the Order of the Night Wind, but that those assassins aren't allowed to operate outside of Hutt space. Now this is interesting. The mayor is flatly denying having sent assassins after Boba, and he simultaneously shifts the blame onto the Hutts. He strongly implies that if these assassins can only operate in Hutt space, it must have been the Hutts who sent them, right? This becomes even more apparent when the mayor tells Boba to go to Garsa's sanctuary. He doesn't really tell Boba why, and when Boba gets there, nothing's really going on. But while there, Garsa Fwip tells him that the Hutt twins are laying claim to Mos Espa, and then they show up at that exact spot immediately afterward. Clearly they knew Boba would be there. I'm guessing because the mayor or someone in his office tipped them off. It definitely seems like the mayor is working to pit Boba and the Hutts against one another. And who knows? The Major Domo definitely puts off a weaselly, slimy vibe. Maybe he's the one pulling the strings. Personally, I'm almost certain that the mayor was the one who sent the Nightwind assassins after Boba. He knows that the Hutts are making a move on Jabba's old territory, and he can easily use them as scapegoats. While Boba and the Hutts duke it out, he and the Pykes, a rival crime family of the Hutts, can continue to conduct their spice business unmolested. The fact that the mayor has the Nightwind assassin executed before he has a chance to say anything only strengthens this argument. Also, why would the assassin say he was sent by the mayor if he was really sent by the Hutts? Everyone seems to know that the Order of the Night Wind is connected with the Hutts. The mayor and the Pykes are clearly trying to wrest this territory away from the Hutts and Boba. Anyway, let's get back to the story. The mayor tells his majordomo to pay Boba a reward for apprehending the assassin. Boba responds with, "I will take this payment as what you should have brought me as tribute." He also puts the mayor in his place by reminding him that he serves at Boba's pleasure. Mokk Shaiz is clearly not ready to overtly challenge Boba and goes along with it. Then he sends Boba to Garsa's, where he'll have his run-in with the Hutt twins. When Boba can tell that Garsa Fwip is nervous, he says that she is, quote, sweating like a Gumpta on Mustafar. I did quite a bit of looking around, and as far as I can tell, this is the first time we've ever heard the word Gumpta in Star Wars. Maybe we'll learn what that is in a second season or one of the other Mandoverse shows. Now we get to Boba's confrontation with the Hutts. First off, the male Hutt is using some cute little furry guy to towel off. But let's get to the good stuff. Black Krrsantan. Those of you who are fans of the Darth Vader comics immediately recognize this guy. The first time we saw him, he actually teamed up with Boba to find Luke Skywalker for Vader. He's essentially a dark side Chewbacca. He even goes toe-to-toe with Chewie in those same comics. I'll be the first to admit that sometimes when a character is adapted to live action from animation or comics, things don't always go smoothly. But Black Krrsantan looks absolutely amazing. Boba, however, is not impressed. "These are not the death pits of Dur, and I'm not a sleeping Trandoshan guard." Clearly not intimidated, Boba basically calls Krrsantan a coward in front of everyone, and I can't help but wonder if this is why Krrsantan attacks Boba as he sleeps in the Bacta tank in an upcoming episode. As the twins leave, they even tell him, "Sleep lightly, bounty hunter." At this point, Boba removes his helmet. Again, he shows his game face when enemies are around, but he wants the people of Mos Espa to see him as their leader, their daimyo. The next thing we see is another flashback to Boba learning to fight with a gaffy stick with the Tusken warrior. At this point, the Tuskens have basically accepted him as an adoptive member of the tribe after he saved the Tusken kid from the behemoth. We talked extensively about how I really can't find a good reason for Boba to trust the Tuskens, but at this point, they trust him, so I guess he's going to stick around. As the warrior is teaching Boba to use a gaffy stick, the Pyke Syndicate's speeder train is heard approaching in the distance. It emits what resembles the cry of a crate dragon, probably to scare off the Tuskens. This is a technique that many people have used in Star Wars. The very first time we see Obi-Wan in A New Hope, he mimics a crate dragon call to scare the Tuskens away from the unconscious Luke. In the now Legends novel Kenobi, the moisture farmers blast crate dragon calls from towers with loudspeakers mounted on them to both scare off attacking Tuskens, as well as alert other settlers in the area that they are under attack. So it seems like the Pikes are well aware of the Tuskens as a threat. But before the Tuskens can do anything, the Pikes open fire on them. Maybe this is a spiteful deterrent from the Pikes, or maybe they've already had run-ins with these Tuskens before. The Tuskens collect the bodies of their fallen tribesmen and burn them on a ceremonial funeral pyre. This was a great scene because it shows that at least this tribe of Tuskens is civilized. They have funeral rites that are actually incredibly similar to the Jedi, who also burned their fallen friends. As he stares into the flames, Boba has his first big moment of introspection in this show. We get multiple shots of him staring into the flames of the funeral pyre. Personally, I think Boba's reflecting on the death and suffering that crime lords and syndicates inevitably leave in their wake. He was nearly one such casualty, and his dad was one. Boba turns away from the fire and sees the Nikto speeder gang pass by in the distance. This is when the Boba we know and love shows his face. This gang didn't do anything to the Tuskens, but Boba needs their bikes. He doesn't go after them out of revenge, but because they have something he needs, and frankly they deserve a good beating because they robbed a local moisture farmer in the previous episode. I love this scene where suddenly Boba's standing in the doorway of the cantina. I can only imagine what the Niktos must be thinking as they stare into the crazed eyes of a guy covered in scars and wearing tattered and torn tan pajamas. Boba proceeds to beat the snot out of the entire Nikto gang. He takes out the first three using a cycler rifle as a club. When that breaks, he switches to the training staff because he doesn't have a real gaffy stick yet. The entire time, Tamara Morrison's acting is amazing. The dude has crazy eyes, the likes of which I've only ever seen in a few ex-girlfriends. Also, let's not forget that he nutshots one of the Niktos. And on a quick side note, the Aurebesh letters on the Nikto biker jackets actually spell out the word Tatooine. Not much there, but still kind of interesting. After this, we get a cool montage of scenes where Boba teaches the Tuskens to ride speeder bikes like a bantha, so that they can take out the Pyke's speeder train. The whole thing has a very cool vibe. It's like The Godfather, a spaghetti western, and a samurai movie all rolled into one, which is actually very similar to how George Lucas describes his original trilogy movies. As they wait for the speeder train to make another appearance, Boba's again training with the Tusken warrior. This time, when she knocks him down, though, she offers him her hand. Just a few scenes earlier, she was slapping him upside the head, so Boba has clearly impressed her. All the other Tuskens, including the kids and the Massiffs, are watching this training session. At this point, they fully accept Boba as one of them. Boba was a clone, one of literally billions made for the Grand Army of the Republic. He only spent about 10 years with his father, Jango, before he died. Then he threw in with Aurra Sing, Bossk, Dengar, and other bounty hunters. Boba's never really had what you could call a family. Here among the Tusken, though, he seems to have found something that he may have never realized he was missing. This is the only reason I can find to explain why he, a man who has traveled all over the galaxy and seen what it has to offer, would want to stay on the backwater that is Tatooine. This is the only reason I can find for him later wanting to become daimyo of Mos Espa. Next, we get an amazing scene where the Tuskens use speeder bikes to take down the massive Pyke Syndicate spice runner. As amazing as this scene looks, there's not really much to discuss here, other than the fact that the Tusken warrior is a total bad A. When the battle's over, we see the Pikes being held prisoner, and several have their masks off. This is interesting because we've seen the Pikes in the Clone Wars without their masks, and they look different. This isn't a big deal because I think they did a really good job here, but they definitely look different than their animated counterparts. We once again see that these Tuskens are unique when Boba releases the Pikes saying, "Your lives are a gesture of our civility." Back at the Tusken camp, the chief decides to teach Boba about his new tribe, and this is actually where the title of the episode comes from. The chief says, "There are many Tusken tribes. Since the oceans dried, we have stayed hidden. Other tribes have survived by killing." This is awesome because it goes into the ancient history of Tatooine. We actually learned quite a bit of this from the original Knights of the Old Republic Xbox game from 2003. Tatooine was originally a lush planet covered with oceans and plant life. However, the planet was discovered by the infinite empire of the Rakatans. They enslaved the ancestors of the Tuskens and forced them to mine the planet for its resources, eventually turned it into the desert wasteland that we're familiar with from the movies. It already looked like this during the time of Darth Revan and Malak, which is approximately 3,000 years before A New Hope. The Tuskens and Jawas, they're the remaining few descendants of the original inhabitants of Tatooine. Many hundreds of years later, the Sand People were given the name Tuskens after they sacked a settler's outpost known as Fort Tusken. This is also why they're often referred to as Tusken Raiders. We learned this from the Legends Kenobi novel, a book that I highly recommend everyone read before the Kenobi series comes out on Disney Plus this summer. If you guys want, I can also cover some of the more important points from that book on this channel. Let me know in the comments below. Now we get to my favorite part of the episode. The Tusken chief wants to repay Boba for all that he's done for the tribe. He gifts him a lizard, which jumps up Boba's nose. At this point, Boba starts to hallucinate. Some people will say that what comes next is simply a bad trip or a spice dream, as Star Wars calls it. However, I believe that the vision Boba has next is too profound and spiritual in nature to simply be the hallucinations of a drug-addled brain. I think that Boba has, at least in some distant sense, a Force vision. Now hear me out. We see many examples of these in the Clone Wars and Rebels TV shows, not to mention Luke's experience in the cave on Dagobah, and their content is remarkably similar to Boba's vision. Let me explain. The vision begins with Boba stumbling along in the dark. His armor fades in and out as he struggles to move forward. In the darkness, bolts of lightning illuminate his path, and we see that he's walking on a tempest-tossed ocean. In the distance, he sees two gnarled and bare trees, one large and the other very similar, just smaller. Boba pushes forward and makes it to the big tree. He seems relieved and reaches out to it, but then it ensnares Boba with its branches and begins to close in all around him. As this happens, we see flashes of Boba in his armor struggling to escape the tree, as well as the Sarlacc in the previous episode. Then, and this is the important part, we see Boba's helmet morph into that of his father, Jango. We see a young Boba sadly watching his father depart Kamino in Slave One. Then we see Boba clawing his way out of the Sarlacc, while in the vision he struggles against the branches of the large tree. Finally, he breaks free of the branches that are trying to suffocate and destroy him, and the vision ends. So what does this all mean? Like so many Force visions, Boba must confront his greatest fear. Once he overcomes it and learns the crucial lesson, the vision ends. Again, this is exactly how these visions work in both the Clone Wars and Rebels, and Dave Filoni, the chosen Padawan of George Lucas, is the mastermind behind both of those shows as well as the Book of Boba Fett. And actually, this vision is probably the closest thing to Luke's Force vision of becoming his father that we see anywhere in Star Wars. Like Luke, Boba's greatest fear is rooted in losing and eventually becoming like his father. Bounty hunting nearly got him killed, just like it did Jango. The tumultuous waves in the vision represent Kamino and Boba's childhood. The large and small tree represent Jango and Boba Fett respectively. When the large tree tries to trap and crush Boba, it represents Jango's legacy and how endeavoring to carry it forward nearly killed Boba just as it killed his father. However, unlike Jango, Boba has been given a second chance. He struggles against the branches of the large tree in the same way that he's been struggling with his father's legacy as he's lived among the Tuskens. When Boba finally breaks free of the branches ensnaring him, he's really breaking free of the belief that he must become his father. He doesn't. He can reinvent himself and chart his own path as a simple man making his way in the galaxy, though not necessarily like his father before him. Really quickly, I want to play a clip from the making of the Mandalorian documentary, where Dave Filoni explains why Star Wars resonates so deeply with so many of us.
And Star Wars ultimately is about family. What saves Luke is his ability to look at all that and look at his father and say, no, I'm going to throw away this weapon. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let that go and be selfless. And he says, you know, I am a Jedi like my father before me, but what he's really saying, and why I connect so powerfully to it, is like he's saying, I love my father, and there's nothing you can do that's going to change that. And Anakin then in that moment has to decide to be the father that he's never had. He has to give up all the power in the galaxy and save his son. And that's the selfless act that he does in return for his son. And that's what saves him in turn. So the son said the father says the son, and it works out perfectly. It's all part of like why it works and why we care. It's not about X-Wings. It's not about all the things we decorate Star Wars in. It's important. It's part of the genius of it. But we soulfully react like we don't just want an action movie. We want to feel uplifted. And Star Wars is an adventure that makes you feel good. You know, it makes me feel like, wow, I want to be a part of that. So that's what I always go back to with Star Wars, is this selfless act and this family dynamic, which is so important to George, so important to the foundation of Star Wars. That's in us. And what I like about it is it is really saying there is a lot of hope out there, that we fundamentally want to be good people, that we can all be driven to do terrible things, but that we can persevere through selfless action. So George has this hopeful story, and it's something that he's reiterated most times I've seen him, you know, after we've been making things without him, is remember to make these stories hopeful. Remember to give that to kids because they really need it. And so that's just something to keep in mind. Did I bring us down?
Wow,
Okay,
no, that is
beautiful.
I think we're done.
Star Wars is a story of fathers and sons. Vader and Luke, Qui-Gon and Anakin, Mando and Grogu, Jango and Boba. Like so many others, I was initially disappointed by the way the show portrayed Boba. Childishly, I was upset that he wasn't as dark, ruthless, cool, and mysterious as he'd been in the original trilogy and the Clone Wars. However, as I've been re-watching the show and making these videos, I realized that what Boba has become and the message that this show conveys is the very reason I love Star Wars. It's why this story means so much to so many of us. It's not just spectacle, it's so much more. Star Wars is the mythology of the modern world. Boba Fett seems different in the show because he is different. That's the whole idea behind Star Wars. It's a story about hope. It's a story about sons and how they can learn from and still love They're imperfect fathers. Anyway, I think I'm going to cut it here. Hopefully you guys don't think I'm totally off my rocker. I hope that you see what I completely missed the first time I watched this episode. Boba is giving up the life of a bounty hunter and crime lord in pursuit of something more. He's becoming a daimyo, a man who leads with respect and honor. As Mayor Mokk Shaiz says, running a family is more complicated than bounty hunting. Boba is becoming the father that his never was. The episode ends as Boba emerges from the tent, dressed in the black robes we see him wearing in The Mandalorian. At this point, the Boba Fett we knew in the original trilogy is gone, essentially having died in the desert of Tatooine. In his place stands a changed man. So, do you think this rebirth is for the better or for the worse? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks guys, I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please hit those like and subscribe buttons if you want to see more content like this. See you next time guys, and may the Force be with you.